So in this video, we try to gain stage this whole track here, this whole project, try to bring some order to the chaos that we have after the creation phase. And we have also a lot of different fader settings, a lot of different tracks without a name, and it's really chaotic, right? And it's a mess to mix down. And I want to show you how I do this, and yeah, try to explain along the way what my workflow or what my process is exactly. So before we start, I encourage you to go to the settings here, and then you switch to settings, then behavior, and set the defaults here for the new track volume to 0 dB. That's what I have all the time. I think default is -10. And the problem with -10 for me is that when you create new tracks, for instance here, audio track, you can see the new created audio track is now -10 dB. And then you want to group this, and the new group is more or less also -10 dB, I think. And then you group this again, and then also -10. And then you get basically a chain of things that have -10 dB. And you're constantly battling with the gain, compensating for the loss of volume. So my solution for that is basically going for a new track volume of 0 dB. And it's also where I want to end up with my master. Maybe not exactly at 0 dB, but maybe at -0.3 or something like this. But, you know, this is the main goal. Okay, so now that we have this, the next setting for me in this project here is to probably set all of the faders to 0 dB. So I do this by selecting all the tracks here, first one, and then holding shift and the last one. And then I go left to the inspector here and type in 0 dB, and you can see all the sliders are now at 0 dB. I do this because these sliders don't mean anything in the previous state. So when we have like this here, you can see this slider here or this track looks like it's quieter than this one. But it doesn't mean anything because how loud a track is or a channel is not decided by the slider, but what it's on the track itself. So let's say you have a polysynth here, and how loud this channel actually is not decided by this slider, and also not by this output slider here, which is -0.5, but also what's on the in the FX box here of the polysynth, so in the FX chain. You can also put in here, let's say, a peak limiter or maybe a tool device, and change the volume. So everything what you have inside the chain, or how loud the voice is, and then how loud your instrument is, and then what kind of setting you have in the slider here, decides how loud the channel is. So it's basically a mess. So when we look this up here in maybe in a more like fake environment, so let's go for polygrid and say you have a volume slider here, say this. In fact, you have actually 3. So this is your main channel fader, this is your output of your instrument, and this is the gain of your voice. So in the main slider here, so this one exactly, is maybe this, and then you have the gain of your instruments like this. So this tells you nothing, because this is important and also this is important. So sometimes some setting like this, or this, or this. So this track looks like it's quieter than this one from the arrangement view. But maybe the gain on the voice and on the instrument itself is louder than actually this one, right? So it depends on all of these settings. So we have to get this straight first. So what I do usually is to get all my tracks to 0 dB. It's the first setting. And then I go to all of these tracks and gain stage to a correct volume, so I know what's going on. And for instance, here with the bass, I do this with the peak limiter, as you can see here. So I go with the peak limiter and bring up the volume to the ceiling of the threshold. So I know exactly this waveform is peaking exactly at 0 dB. And also in the same process, I can limit the dynamic range. The more I push here basically into the limiter. So all I'm doing is peak normalization. So I bring the peaks up to the ceiling of 0 dB. And then after this here, you can see I'm dialing in -4 dB because now I know that I have exactly peaking this bass here at -4 dB. Because the slider is at 0, the peak limiter brings this up to 0 dB here. And when I do here -4, I'm exactly at -4. And you can measure this also here, maybe with the dB meter. Switch this to, let's see, mode EBU RMS. You can see here the max to peak is -4.3. Right, so I know exactly this track here is -4 dB in context of my whole track, okay? So that's what I'm doing. I'm gain stage on the track itself. All the faders are at 0 dB, so I know exactly where my audio material is peaking on all of these tracks. So before I continue here with the gain staging, I bring some order to the chaos in terms of where these tracks are. So for instance, I group together all my drum sounds, and I do this here in Bitwig by just clicking on the kick and holding Control and G for grouping. And I name this group drums. And I put all my percussion sounds here, percussion heads, rides, percussion clap, let's see, bell sound, crash, and XO, of course, and put this here into the drum group. So now I have grouped here my drums a bit. Maybe we can also change here the color of this. Let's see, to gray, and put this here on top, and we can listen to it. Sounds fine. So now we have the drums here together, and closer to this I bring here the bass. And we have only one bass sound in here, so I don't really need to group this. So when I have multiple bass lines, I tend to group these basses also together, like I did here with the drums, and call this bass. And what I also do is I bring the bass and the drums also together into a group, which is called drum and bass group. And I do this because the bass and the drums I usually tend to push much harder in terms of limits or limiting and clipping and so on. So I push this much harder than the rest of the sounds, which are more like I want to have more dynamic and transparent, right? So the rest of the tracks here are usually land in a group I call like music. Or something like this. You can also call it atmospheric, or I don't know. So this group is more like something where I tend to be a bit more gentle with the compression, and I want to keep it more transparent and wide and fluffy, you know, keep all the dynamics in there. So I create subgroups and treat these subgroups differently, or almost like different songs. And then when I treat them like I want to, I put them all together into one group, which is called all. And this all group is basically my master chain. And on this master chain, there's usually some kind of limiting happening later on, or something like this. So I can remove here from the master this. And I do this here because now I have the possibility to master this whole group here completely, and also have the possibility to use, for instance, some kind of track, reference track, right? You can take your, for instance, an MP3. I don't know what's on there. Put this on here, and then compare basically your track to a reference track pretty easily. You have this side by side without going that this track goes into the master, and on the master you have like all your compressions and EQing happening, and already compressing and limiting your reference material too, which is not what I want. I want to keep this completely unprocessed and want to compare it to my processed track. So that's what I usually do. You can also use multiple tracks here, and you can switch to this mode, which you can use just a tab, and activate the A/B slider. Say your track is A and your reference track is B, and then you can slide between A and B here, maybe also with the controller. That's something I do sometimes with drum bass tracks, where you can just compare two tracks easily and super. Yeah, it's basically a nice workflow for me. So that's what I do sometimes. So let's remove this here because we don't want to compare it actually to something, and go into the different groups here. So now inside the music group, we can also push this a bit further here. For instance, I have synths in here where I have also strings. Maybe I want to group the strings together. We have some polysynths here. These maybe together. So it's not really important that you follow the same rules I do here. But you can group these tracks maybe together into more meaningful subgroups. This is here, I think, a piano. So let's call it this. And put this here into strings. Maybe call it now orchestra or something. Then we have some arpeggiators here, a polysynth also. These are vocals. I have a bell sound, feedback stuff, fade in. This is FX here. So this is basically just a noise fade in, I think. Yeah. We have here some hardware synths I sampled. That's pretty quiet. Oh, there's a filter on there, I see. There's a filter, yeah, with automation on there. But okay. So I use different methods of gain staging for different instruments. So for instance, in the drum bass group here, I treat this like a drum bass track. Even though it's more like a laid back and chill out tune, I treat this whole group like I mix down or master drum bass tracks. So for instance, here the drums are pushed into limiters, drum bass is also pushed into a limiter or into a clipper, and yeah. So let's go for the drums here first. And I start with the kick drum probably because the kick drum is always one of my loudest things in the mix. So I'm using here no MIDI clips. I use notes from the XO channel, which is this one here. So this one basically defines a whole pattern of drums, triggering this drum sampler here, and there's a kick in there. And I take basically the MIDI notes from here and trigger this E-kick to layer beneath this XO drum sampler. So what I do here is I have some EQing happening. The output is at 0 dB, of course. Then I have here a frequency splitter, some processing on the top end. And then at the end here, I go again into a limiter, and you can see I'm scratching here the ceiling of exactly 0 dB with the kick drum. And I can decide here how much I want to compress or reduce the dynamics of the kick drum. And I use a limiter because I like limiters on the kick drum. I want to have round, soft kick drums. That's what I like. When I use here a clipper, for instance, a hard clip, It doesn't sound very well in my opinion. You can reduce a lot of dynamics with the clipper, but you get this distorted kind of hardcore sound. Maybe you want to produce a hardcore track, then that's the way to go, right? But in my opinion, I want to have more like a soft and round kick drum. So I'm going here for a limiter. And because I'm mixing into a limiter here with a ceiling of 0 dB, and now exactly here at the fader, I'm peaking exactly at 0 dB, or maybe I go here to 0, or maybe minus 0.1. So this is my anchor in this mix down. I want to have this kick drum heard in all occasions. I want to cut it, that it cuts through the mix, and it should be pretty clearly audible at all times. So I'm pushing here, of course, also the high end, so I have a lot of frequencies in all the important areas here, so below 100 hertz for the bass of the kick drum, at 1K so you can clearly hear it, and also at 10K here to get this click on top, right? So you have also, when you hear it on a smartphone or something, you can hear the small little click of the kick drum at all times. Can make this more clear here with the click sound. And maybe I also have here a small distortion on the kick drum at the top end, so I get this click more, more clear out. But not too much. It's not a hardcore track. I want to keep it soft and round, like I said. Okay, so now that we have this, we bring in here the rest of the drums. And I can remove this here. And the rim shot here also scratches the surface, which is okay. And we have here a hard clip, probably killing a lot of peaks already. And in my opinion, it's better to go with the ears on this one instead of having here a visualizer and using a hard clip with the visualizer, because it leads you basically to watching what's happening and then deciding on that instead of based on what you hear. So you can clearly hear when I push here this material into the clipper, it changes the tonality and how it sounds. So for me, this is the best balance. That's what I decide based on taste and also on what I know that I hear scratching basically the surface with the rim shot. And it's completely fine for me this way. Then we have the crash here. The crash is dialed in pretty loosely here. I don't care if it actually scratches the surface of any threshold. I'm just dialing this in here by taste. Okay, so based on all of these different situations, I create here basically my mixdown of the drums. So we have a clap here, bring in the clap. So the clap is here at -7 or 8 dB. So again, you have the same process. I'm bringing up the clap to the threshold, and then again dial in -8 dB, and now exactly this clap is peaking at -8 dB. And this way you can remember certain type of numbers, right? You know, for the next track, oh, when I bring up my clap up to 0 dB here and dial it in 8 dB, it sounds probably fine. Maybe in another track it's maybe -9 or -7 or something like this, right? But you are on the same range and area, and you can remember certain type of numbers, and they add up, so you can build some kind of construct in your head what kind of dBs you need for certain type of instruments or certain type of frequencies. Okay, we have a second clap here. Don't want to limit too much here, just normalize this a bit. I wish we had some kind of normalizer in Bitwig, like for the peak limiter where you can push a button, then it analyzes for 5 seconds or something, and then you get the right input loudness here, but we don't have that. It's also -8. I have some VST plugins that do this, and I'll show you this in a minute here with the music group, where I do this all the time. But for here, I show you this method with using the peak limiter with just Bitwig only tools. We have some hi-hats here. Okay, we have some we have this, maybe -3 is enough here for the hi-hats, or -4. Okay, nice. Then we have some rides here. You can also use your peak limiter, bring this up. We can also basically check if we don't have any drastic changes in the material over time, and it also makes us basically safe and keeps or tames the peaks a lot. We go also here to -8. Again, we have another percussion track here, this one. Same here. So I just use this peak limiter as a visualizer here now. I can control where I am. Yeah, this is fine. -3, maybe -4, -5 should be good. We have already low cut on there, and it sounds okay to me. So now that we have here the drums mixed or well balanced, kind of, we have now the track or the bus itself, and we can see we surpass here 0 dB, of course, because we're mixing together certain frequencies, and the frequencies overlap, and then they add up, and we end up above 0 dB. So what we can do here is just put a hard clip on there. It's probably just some things here. Let's see with the peak limiter. It's basically just a kick drum and a rim shot peaking a bit here. But we get rid of this here with the hard clip. Just putting this on, input at 0, output at 0. It's just, you know, clipping at 0 dB. That's it. And now we basically fine here. What we also can do is, and that showed you in the other videos, you can use ozone to balance this out. And maybe watch the frequency balance video or the generic overview video of this mixdown series here to get more information about this. But you can use the matching algorithm. So we analyze here the drum bus. Let's see. Maybe go over here. So we analyze. Enough. Then we use 6 dB guide or pink noise here. Match the curve 10%, it's enough. And then we go into the clipper. So this is something you can do. Like I said, also in the other video, you can use my FX3 tip here if you don't use Ozone 8. Put the limiter in each of these boxes here and basically drive it up until you hit the ceiling. or you use Ozone 8, or you can use Unfilter by Synaptic. It's also a nice plugin, which basically analyzes here a learning process is happening all the time, and it matches basically to a pink noise curve, if I'm not wrong. And then you can choose here with the intensity, how muffled or how bright you want to have your material. And I think here around 0.4, it's a sweet spot for me, I think. So I have this also as default preset when I load this plugin here, so I only need to put it on the track and then everything figures out itself. The problem with Unfilter is for me that it sounds in certain occasions, or when you have it on drums, you can hear that it's a spectral type of tool. You can hear the spectral smudge and smearing sometimes in certain frequencies. So I usually try to only keep it to the master bus, this thing here, and when I want to do some quick masterings. Okay, so Ozone 8 is nice for me. It's the best plugin to balance this out here against pink noise curve. So we have did this. We also get rid of some peaks here on the drums. And again, how much you drive the drums into the clipper here is basically decided by how loud you want to have your material and what kind of goal you're aiming for. For instance, this is more of a laid-back track here. It's 105 BPM. It's more like a chill-out tune with a lot of pads in the background. So I don't want to drive this like an hardcore drum bass track, right? So I could do this, but I don't want to. So it's a creative decision, basically. But now we know that the drums are peaking at 0 dB. That's important. Now we go to the bass track here. And the bass track here I've already dialed in -4 dB. But I show you, we have this here peaking at 0 dB again, like all the other drum tracks. And because I know this is a bass here and we have a lot of frequencies down here, I usually go for -4 or -3 dB below the drums. This is what I meant with you can remember certain type of numbers, and it's probably okay to dial in -4 or -4, -3. Sometimes you have to go lower, or sometimes a bit higher. It depends on what kind of notes you are hitting, which keys you are on. You know, different frequencies need different loudness levels. So, but I can remember certain type of numbers here, and I know exactly -4 will be fine. Okay, so when I mix together the bass and the drums now, it's probably okay. Maybe I have too much overtones here, but I can clear this out with an EQ. But the sub bass should be fine. And we can put here also an 8 on it. Maybe something with some overtones in it. So stop it, pink noise, matching. And it even wants to reduce a certain type of low end. It's probably because also of the kick drum, but you can get rid of this in a moment. So we have here a bass, and we have here side chaining, getting information from the kick drum. And reducing here the kick drum every time the kick drum comes in, we reduce here by, I don't know, 4 or 5 dBs. We can push this even further. And this also depends on how fat or how many low end your kick drum has, right? So if there's a lot of low end in the kick drum, then you probably need to reduce this even more. If you have a more like a high pitched kick drum, then you maybe don't need sidechain at all. So you have to decide on this. And yeah. 10% is perfectly fine. And then we go again into a clipper here. Hard clip. Maybe put a peak limiter on there so we can see what's going on. And see the drums are peeking out here still. And maybe you can push this here with 3 dB. Or 6. Depends on how much dynamic you want to have in there. We basically have now here a drum bass track without any melodies or pad sounds or anything. And if I put here a dB meter on that, we can measure. So I have here short-term loudness maximum of -10 LUFS. And push this a bit more. Maybe too much, so -4, and we can also go here maybe to the drums and use here the transient shaper trick I showed you also in the initial video. Transient control, and maybe push here by 10% to sustain it. To get more of this pumping effect here with the transient control. I also made a video just about this transient control trick here. That's also on my channel. 20%. So this is perfectly fine. I don't want to have this at -6 dB, -6 LUFS, because it's a laid-back tune. I want to keep some dynamics in there. It's already pretty loud, but you can see you can drive this pretty easily to any parameter or to any value you want. Okay, so now we have the drum bass bus kind of ready, and it sounds okay to me. I mean, I can't hear it at the moment over my speakers, so I'm only using my headphones, so I'm not sure, but I think it sounds okay-ish. But this is also something you have to do. You have to test it on multiple speakers, right, and make some changes to here and there, and also maybe try out different methods, maybe try out different loudness levels. Sometimes certain songs sound better with more dynamic. Or most of the tunes. So now that we have this here made our drum bass bus pretty clean and it works great, we go over here to the music group, and there are a lot of tracks actually in there. And what we can do is we can use here, instead of using this trick of using a peak limiter and driving everything up to 0 dB, what we did here with the drum bass tracks, we can do something like using a dB meter here, like this one. And the dB meter here basically analyzes your track, and you can put in a reference level you want to have your volume at. And then you push a button and it changes the volume to match that level. And what you can do is, maybe let's dial in here -40, 14 dB. And put this on all these tracks here. Something like this. We can remove this here. This over here. And we can push this to 0 dB. This over here. And when we have this on all tracks, we can then easily just let the track run, analyze all the tracks, and then we normalize to match minus 14 dB. So we have fx here, put this on fx. Also, maybe over here. Okay. So maybe we have to listen to the whole track, because not on every occasion everything happens at the same time. You can see you have certain instruments only playing at certain sections, so you have to be aware of that. But this plugin I'm using here basically uses the short-term loudness max and remembers the maximum peak or loudness peak happening on that track, no matter how often you play it. And you can reset this only by clicking on reset. So for instance, let's see, this one here is playing. You can see here it says short-term loudness max is minus 11, but we want to have minus 14. And we can do this by just clicking the small little button here. It says match short-term loudness max with reference level. The reference level is minus 14, so it changes then the gain when I push this button. I can increase this here a bit so you can see it. You can see it subtracts basically minus 2.2 dB to bring it to minus 14. It also resets the short-term max volume here again and starts to measure. So you can do this over and over. Close this down. Let's see what we have here. You can see we have also here some fade-ins happening. So it's better to just listen to the whole track before you start to match basically, or use this button here to match the loudness. Okay, so we have the complete track here analyzed, and we can now step here to each little thing and push here the normalized button. We have increase here of 10 dB on this one. Minus 4.3 dB, okay. And Loves is basically not analyzing only the peak, it's also taking into account how your ears work, the Fletcher-Munson curve. Yeah, so it should be fine. Orchestra, so we have these three. Are pretty quiet. Oh, there's no track on this one. We can completely remove this. Nice. Okay. So we have basically gain staged now all the musical tracks here. We have basically now a nice space for dialing in things that we want to change, or creative changes, or changes based on taste. So sometimes you don't want the strings not too loud, you know, more in the background. So you have some creative changes to do, but it's a nice space to actually use the sliders now here to offset certain type of sounds. Let's see. I probably want to have the feedback sound here much quieter than it actually is. It's way too much in the... Orchestra, maybe -4. Maybe -5. Maybe this is also too loud. -4. So on the bus of music, we can put here a EQ, maybe low cut a bit of the stuff, because we have a lot of kick drums and, you know, this big fat bass in the low end here. So we need to cut something out. And put the limiter on there. Low release, just in case. So yeah, I think the rights are too loud. I pull this down, -12. You can see now these sliders have some kind of meaning. You can see that we offset here basically the orchestra, we made this quieter. We also did here the M32 a bit quieter. So now all these sliders have some kind of meaning to it, right? You can also sort this now by how much you offset these sliders. And then you have more control, better overview of what's happening in your mixdown. What did you change, right? And yeah, that's how I approach it most of the times. I also think this one is way too loud here. I pushed this way too much into the clipper, probably. Maybe go back to -15. Still too loud. Does the bell sound here? Maybe also a bit too loud, I don't know. Oh, let's use here this one, -3. So now that we have this, we can go to the all track here, which is our main master. And usually I tend to check here with the ozone. And you can put all your nice little mastering tools on there. You can use all your available VSTs. So let's analyze here a bit. Stop it. Pink noise. You can see the kick drum still goes into the ceiling. So maybe we can use a clipper here too. Maybe go a bit more gentle with -1 dB in there. Maybe this feedback a bit too loud. -6. -10. Much. So I basically try to reduce dynamics, but not too much, and I don't want to, you know, limit or flatten all these small little pads here too much. But I try to, you know, increase the volume, increase or decrease the dynamics a bit here with the limiter. But you can see I don't drive it too much into the ceiling here. What you can also use for VSTs here is, I think it's called signed miner. And what it does, it basically reduces the whiteness when there is some problems in the stereo phase distortion field here. As you can see, we can move this up, so make the track wider. But when there are some phase issues or everything below a certain frequency here, bass mono at 90 Hertz. So you have no widening below 90 Hertz. I think everything below 90 Hertz is mono with this plugin. Okay, so this is how I would approach to mix down basically a messy track or project. Some of these tracks I already balanced out pretty well in the beginning. So it was again a bad example because most of these things here I do while I'm creating the song. And when you watch sometimes my streams, I do this on the fly. So I group everything together into groups. Level out everything the best I can, and that's why I don't have to do that much anymore in the end. So it's pretty rarely that I have a messy project to begin with. But sometimes I get, you know, projects from different people. They send me over their stuff and ask me, what would you change? And then I start over and do all these things here I did to this project and try to bring in some order. And yeah, basically start at the ground and then build upon that. Start with the kick drum as my anchor in the mixdown, and then level everything below the kick drum. Bring in dynamics here, dynamic limitations to the drums, to the bass, to the drum bass group. Treat this like a whole different track here. I treat this basically like a drum bass tune. That's why I called also here this drum bass. To get the dynamics out and upfront everything. And then the music bus here is also a different track. It's more like an ambient tune, and then I bring this ambient tune together with the drum bass tune. So I treated everything basically like a subgroup or a submix. And then you can basically step from track to track and from bus to bus and implement all the changes. And yeah, it's not like you're jumping from one track to the other track and, you know, you change everything all over the place all the time, which makes it pretty chaotic and takes a lot of time. So in my opinion, this is a quick workflow to do. The thing here with the dB meter is something you don't need to do. You can also do the same thing like I did here with drums, where I use a limiter, a peak limiter, and bring everything up to the ceiling. And also the thing I did here with the dB meter, you can also do with drums if you want to. If you have like more like jazzy dynamic drums and you want to keep the dynamics and you want everything in a, yeah, not so pushy, not so flat, then you can use just the dB meter here. It's by the way, it's a free plugin. It's don't cost you anything. You can switch here to the RMS mode, which is the old measuring method by using the peaks, and RMS is basically peaks over a certain time window. It's here, it's 600 milliseconds. So basically peaks measured over a time of 600 milliseconds. And then you have this EBU mode, which is more like a standard, where you have defined standardized measuring methods, and also the frequencies are taken into account, so how many low frequencies there are in there. So it's a much better method of measuring loudness, the EBU mode, and I only use EBU in most of my cases. I don't want to measure RMS or peaks or anything. I just go straight for EBU and use these numbers. And yeah, you can put this on all the tracks, use it to normalize. You can not only normalize here to short-term loudness max, you can also, as you can see, the true peak max here, and momentary loudness max, and integrated loudness. So you have everything here. You have this button below you can use to match against your reference level you put in above. Okay. What else? Yeah, this tutorial is basically based around gain staging. If you want to learn more about frequency balance and how I mix down, then there are also 2 different other tutorials on this channel. I link them down in the description. You can watch these, and there are probably more tutorials about this whole mastering thing I do in the future, in the near future. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video. I hope you learned something. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.